So hey guys, I'm Corey, and I'm talking about my project of TacTex', even though I'm representing UCF, and this is for the PowerTAC competition, which is a trading agent competition. So this is the outline of what I'm presenting on. I'll eventually start with talking about what is the smart grid, what devices make it possible, and why is it important, and then I'll talk about what is PowerTAC, so the competition in itself, how it works. I'm not going to talk about the competition from its inception until today because the rules change every year. I'll just talk about the 2003 implementation or 2013 implementation of the PowerTAC competition, and then I'll go on to the implementation of a broker, TacTex'13, and then what it does. So I'll be talking about algorithms and strategies it has, and also talk about the conclusion as far as results, like how did it perform amongst all the other brokers, and then of course conclusions and references. So what is the smart grid? As you kind of see with the picture down there in the corner, it's a visual representation of the grid itself. You'll see renewable energy sources in the bottom right, other power sources, which is typically coal or nuclear, on the left, and then you'll see the substations and transformers to distribute power from the transmission power lines to not only residential homes, but businesses, small and large. So Wikipedia gives a definition of a smart grid as something that delivers electricity from the supplier to the consumer via bidirectional communication. So that means that there's communication from the supplier to the producer and vice versa. And so there's a lot of goals with that. And those are saving energy, reducing production costs, and increasing the reliability of the grid. And I'll talk into what that means and how that works. So how is it? So power generally comes from, like I said, renewable energy, but primarily from, like say, a coal nuclear power plant. And that's transmitted over power lines and then delegated to substations and transformers. That way you don't have 10 megawatts of power coming into your laptop. You know, you fry yourself every time you touch it. So some notes about this is the utility power is sent almost at the speed of light. So whenever power is generated, it has to be used almost instantaneously. So that means that you have to meet demand for every minute, every hour, every day. So how do they do that? You have to have a very complex algorithm to deal with this. And in the past, it's basically been be more safe than sorry, so you don't have to deal with a blackout, so produce way more than we need. Well, if you produce way more than you need, you're spending way more money than it's needed to actually meet that demand. So with the advent of technology, meters, devices become cheaper. So they put meters and devices on everything, so you can see distribution curves and power and reports that are drawn to see, well, how much power is needed at, you know, person A's home versus this business. You know, how volatile is that community? And so you can kind of see that over time. And so a lot of this gives the ability to see where do power failures actually occur? How do you reroute energy? And the reason for that is sometimes power lines actually overheat, and some of that overheating will cause a line to fail, so you'll have blackouts in specific areas, like say in your house, or you'll see like that power box next to a power pole explode sometimes. So how is this possible? The primary device that makes the whole smart grid system possible is called smart meters. These devices allow two-way communication. Currently, it's mostly just data, not controls. So in other words, that allows the utility to see what's being used, when, and how. But it does not currently allow the utility to say, I want to turn off this person's dishwasher. It does not allow them to do that. But policymakers and the future potentially will have that ability to turn off non-critical devices. So say your AC, they may leave that on, but say you're washing dishes and a mission-critical operation, whatever that is, say the Department of Defense or military needs a significant amount of power for something. They can talk to the utility and say, hey, shut down non-critical systems. They can shut those down to meet the demands needs for that time. And then after the military or whatever is done with their mission-critical operation, they can supply that power back to you again. And that may come as an incentive because even though they're turning things on and off, they can say to you, hey, John Doe, even though we're turning off your dishwasher for 2 minutes, we're going to save you like $200 in your monthly bill. So that might be something that's like an incentive to the consumer. This also allows for the use of cleaner power sources. So say if there's less wind, less sun from a cloudy sky, they can wait until the clouds clear up so that way you can get sun again for your solar panels, and that gives power back to the distribution system. And I'm telling you all this because these are all factors that are accounted for in the PowerTAC competition. So who's using this? Google started this with their power meter system, which allows you to connect to your smart meters or to utility. Microsoft followed up with it a year later with Home. And of course, there's DIY solutions like the Tweedlewatt, which allows you to substation or sub-meter your entire room for about $93. It's pretty cool. So why is it important? I put some financial estimates up there from 2010, 2009, which is what instigated the PowerTAC competition and financially as an incentive. A lot of money is going into this. I also put Facebook down as a $52 billion net worth in 2015. The reason for that and why I'm telling you that is because if you were to make energy social, you can tie into that financially on both sides. And people always want to tie into this because you see big companies like Walmart saying, look how sustainable and renewable we are as an incentive. Like, look, we're using these Walmart bags, and people like that whole pride thing about it. So I talked about some background on that, and now I'll talk about the PowerTAC competition as it stood in 2013. I actually don't know what time I'm at. I'm trying to go pretty quick, but okay, I'm on your schedule. All right, so PowerTAC, it's a competitive, simulated, liberalized energy market. So right now we have regulated monopolies, which essentially means when you sign up your home, you don't have a choice where your power comes in. If you're in the net grid of, say, FPL, you're getting power from FPL or nowhere. But if you were to liberalize that market, that means you could say, I want John's power or I want Sammy's power. You can choose who you get your power from by contractual agreements called tariffs, and I'll explain what that is in a second. So how this competition fits in is you, as a developer, will design brokers, and the brokers are these agents who will then buy energy or do contractual agreements with a supplier of energy and then sell it to a consumer. So say I can say, I'll buy 5 kilowatts of energy for $10 and I'll sell it for $12. I just made a $2 profit. So the goal then, of course, is to maximize your profit through buying and selling. So tariffs, I talked to you about tariffs. What are they? A tariff is essentially a contract. So everyone here knows what a contract is. You do it with your cell phones. So essentially there's different sections of these contracts that are a part of the PowerTAC competition. You can have percent renewables, and this implies a degree of uncertainty or a volatility to your energy. So say if you are okay with being super sustainable and 100% renewable, that means you're also okay with having power down typically at night because there's no sun for solar and there may not be wind for power generation as well. And then, of course, there's pricing mechanisms like, do you want to have fixed price contract? Do you want to have a time of use price? Do you want to have variable rates? And there's costs of benefits and fees. So do you want to break away from that contract? Like whenever you have your cell phone, you break from the contract, you have to pay a fee for that. Same thing that happens with this. It's also sign-on bonuses and loyalty discounts. Like if you've been with a consumer for a long period of time, they may offer you financial incentives. So this is the broker. Do I have a mouse? I do. So a broker manages an hourly portfolio. A utility today has minute-by-minute generation, but for the sake of this competition, it's just on an hourly basis. And you have 7 days a week, 24 hours or 24 time slots. And then the basis of the competition is approximately 22 weeks. They don't give you a start amount, like an actual amount of weeks, because then you can have end-of-game strategies. So they give you a variable amount of weeks. They have the option of creating and modifying tariffs, which are those contracts with not only the producers, but the consumers of energy. You have to balance those offers to make sure you're maximizing your profits. And then you can create bids to not only the wholesale market to buy your energy, but then also from the distributed utility if you need to make up for that. So I don't know if that is making a sense. At the end, I'll have a time for questions. So if you have any, feel free to ask that time. Or now if you really need to. So this is essentially a conceptual idea of time. So the very beginning of your time slot, you'll do your trading with your wholesale market, buying and selling for each time slot. You'll get your weather reports, and weather is really important because you need to know like if it's sunny, if it's cloudy. Because if it's cloudy, you're spending less money on AC, which means less power that's needed by the utility. Also, if you're in the north, people up there don't have AC, right? Because it's so cold usually. You have heaters if you need to. You also get to know the season and your geographical location. So this will provide you all that data, and throughout the extent of the competition, you not only change geographical areas, but you also change seasons throughout the competition. So that's something that you have to account for, and you given a 48-hour prediction time. So you have to account for that within your time slots. You also have the option of creating your tariffs, your contracts with your customers, and then balancing any kind of needs with your wholesale utility. And then, of course, you do your accounting at the very end of that time slot or that hour that you make for decisions in the next period, which is right here. And I'm going pretty fast because, honestly, this is a really complex competition. So if you have any questions, I can come back to it and explain it again, so that's fine. So some predictions or some facts that are known in this. There's a lot of knowns, but there's also a lot of unknowns as well. So for instance, you know your utility. Utility is like our professor talked about, is like your balance. So you can have debt, you can have like thousands or millions of dollars in debt, and you can also have $1 million in profit. So this is just how much money you own. Meter readings, so you know this historical data about meters usage at each person's house. Also what kind of equipment they are, like are they a 24/7 factory or are they a 9-to-5 office space? Because each one of those factors determines what kind of energy they'll be using at different times during the day. Different fees too, like for instance, if your customer is 2 states away, you're going to incur a lot of fees trying to send that utility to that person, whereas if he's right next to you, it's going to be very little distribution fees. And then there's also balancing, so for instance, if you do not meet demand that's needed for a specific customer, they'll have a blackout, meaning like their power going down, and you will incur fees for that, which is a high cost. So it's more worthwhile for you to have procured more energy for that time slot. So other unknowns is like the game end time, like I mentioned. You don't know the acceptance of other brokers and the other brokers' rates. So for instance, if customer B wants to take your money right now, I don't know that. I just know that they didn't accept my bid. So I cover the left side. I'll be talking about the right side right now, talking about my implementation of TacTex'13 and the algorithm strategies that are used in that. And then I'll go through the competition results, conclusion, and references. So for TacTex'13, this is a broker. As I mentioned before, this is the middleman between the producers and the consumers of energy. It has to use time slot acquisition. They mentioned in our paper that the primary algorithm is based on something called TOS-Tesoro, which is a Markov decision process or a modification of that. And it focuses on farther rather than shorter. So the conceptual idea is you as a broker can consume way more energy than you need for time slots in the future. And then as it gets closer, other people may not have planned ahead, so they may need to buy. It's cheaper to buy from another broker than a utility at that point in time, so you may make a profit off of reselling those time slots. So the idea is buy more in the future, incur penalties now, and even though you're in debt, you can resell, and that'll maximize your utility in the long run. So that's how this algorithm works. The variables that are used, of course, you have your time slot, where you're at, that's T. And then you have your price selling point for energy, so how much are you selling your utility for, that's PT. Predicted demand, so how much do you predict for that time slot customer A to have, that's DT. And the procurement costs for that demand. So say if they need an extra 3 kilowatt hours, how much is that going to cost you? And then the decisions that are made based upon those variables are the wholesale and tariff strategies, and those are interdependent, meaning they work with each other to make a final financial decision. So I want to go through some algorithms, and notice in the top right, I will always have a legend for you because often when people show algorithms, I have no idea what they're talking about. So hopefully this will help kind of illustrate what those kind of mean. The basics idea, like I mentioned, is the closer in time you are after the initial phase is you want less risk now, more risk incurred or available for the future. And so what it does is it optimizes costs given current demand and the energy selling price. So that little hat symbol you see on the, I can move my mouse, the little hat symbol you see there, that means your current estimate. And so what you're trying to do with this formula, which is right here, your utility equals demand times the price minus the cost. I don't know if that makes any sense. So essentially, like, what's your delta times your amount demand, and that's your utility. So given what you know for D and P, make a optimization for your cost, and that's what this algorithm is here. And then the same formula, but now you have your cost that you got from Formula 1, and now you're going to optimize your predicted demand and your procurement costs for that demand. So those are going to be used in our strategies I'll talk about later for the wholesale and the tariff selling strategies. So this, as I mentioned earlier, is based off this MDP algorithm and the Markov decision process. This basically says, okay, you need to have a balancing price allotted for each of those states. An S state means 24 hours in the future. So say S state of 3 is 3 hours from now. State of 0 is this current point in time. So if S is 0, meaning it's right now, you just go with the cost that you've assumed from earlier. Otherwise, you'll create your V of S, or that value for that state, using this algorithm. So I'll give it generically, and if you have questions about it, feel free to ask, and I will explain what each of those variables mean more in detail. And feel free to use that legend down there to kind of help illustrate what each of those facts mean. So you use the last Vs minus 1 on the far right here. Use the last value of that state, and then you multiply it by the probability that you won't clear for that, and then you add it to the limit price times the probability you will, and that's your minimum limit price for that value of that state. So again, I don't expect you to completely absorb all this, but I'm just showing this to you as a quick run through. So if later you want to watch these lectures online, or if you want to look at the slides, you will have this data available to you if for whatever you have a burning need to learn more. And you're of course willing to talk to me after if you like. So these are the strategies I mentioned: wholesale strategy and tariff strategy. I didn't want to put the pseudocode in here, so I just put this because this is a very generalized version of it. So if you want the pseudocode, I can get it for you. So basically it counts the needed energy. So like if your customer historically has a demand for energy of 20 kilowatt hours at 3 a.m. in the morning, you will have that accounted here. Densities, meaning do you have historical data for that time slot? And then if you have enough data, meaning like you know that customer really well, then you can solve that Markov decision process from this last algorithm right here. If you don't have historical data, you don't know the customer, you have no idea what they want, then you just basically randomize that bidding process. And you say like, all right, I'll just assume he needs this much based upon customers around them. And then you submit those bids with those limit prices. So that's your wholesale strategy. And then you get to that tariff strategy I just mentioned earlier, which is that contractual agreements that you make. So you populate your candidate tariffs by this formula, which essentially just generates, okay, what kind of tariffs do you have? What kind of tariffs do you need? And for each of those tariffs, you do this, which is essentially you estimate your utility, which is a long-term estimate for the income cost estimates for that tariff. I didn't go through the time of putting that in there because I had like 30 slides for this presentation. It took me like an hour to get through, and I had to chunk out a lot. So I have backup slides. If you want to look at it, I can talk to you about what this formula actually does. So you actually estimate your utility for each of those tariffs, and then based upon your finding your maximum, so it kind of goes to that formula as I was talking about earlier and maximizing your potential utility. And then basically it gives you a value for your best tariff and the best utility for that tariff. And then from that, if your best possible value for doing something is greater than doing nothing, then do it. Otherwise, if doing nothing is your best bet, then don't do anything. And that's what that's telling you is the tariff look ahead. And that policy is configured for the next 7 days, and each day has 24 time slots. And like I mentioned, no op up here means do nothing. So basically doing nothing. So now that I've explained all that, I'll talk about the competition results. The average results, and I have the number of games that were simulated on the parentheses right here on the right, is in the 2-agent competitions, meaning it's just my agent and someone else's agent. How well did I do? We won all of them. Just bar none, we won all of them. The 4-agent competitions won 15 out of 16 of them. Crocodile Agent, which I think is an Australian group that put that together. They got second or first place in one of the competitions. And in the 7-agent competitions, we didn't do that well, which is basically all the agents compete in the same market. Even though you'll see right here in this blue, we have the most tariff contracts with most energy distributed. We incurred so much costs and fees from not planning adequately that we actually did pretty poorly in the 7-agent competition because our strategy was very aggressive. So we did get all the contracts, but in doing so, we incurred so many fees that just didn't matter. So that was something that we plan to modify next year. And in conclusion, I think this competition is pretty basic compared to all the stuff that's needed to account for with energy, but it's a great start. A lot of the things that need to be accounted for the future that they will add in future years are right here, like adding electric vehicles. Like say, if you had an electric vehicle, how does that play a role in there? Partnerships, like if me and broker B want to make a partnership and saying like, hey, I'll stay off your turf if you stay off mine. How does that play a role? Rebates and incentive, blackout fees, transmission loss. A lot of things need to be added to make this more realistic, but I think this is a great start. And in general, I got to say this is a smarter move towards a smarter power future because we need to be more sustainable with our energy use, and we need to move away from this concept of regulated monopolies because competition does drive down price. Like Pepsi and Coca-Cola. Pepsi's quote was, "We are thankful for Coca-Cola," because because of the competition, they have had a better product. So if we have competition in the energy market, that will bring about better price for us as the consumer and more profit margins that can be incurred by the utilities or the brokers. These are my references. So I'll open up for questions, and I can go through all these slides if you need to and explain anything you have. But that's essentially my presentation.
So in the paper, do they talk about how long it takes them to solve the MVP and how many times they have to go through and like resolve it? I didn't have a sense. So how long does the whole competition go on? Is this like a 15-minute competition? Right?
Okay, so good question. There's approximately 22 weeks. They said it ranges from 18 to 30. They don't give you an estimate of weeks. Each day has 24 time slots or 24 hours, and each time slot is 10 seconds long. Okay. So that length of competition varies upon how many weeks are in there. And they said that their algorithm takes about 7 seconds to solve everything, and then they only allows them 3 seconds to actually produce their tariffs and everything. So if in their algorithm they have like a cutoff time, like if it runs beyond 7 seconds, they just cut off all calculations and they just push out tariffs for what their best estimates are currently. So I don't know if that answers.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay.
It seems like your algorithm performs better in the monopoly market right now.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely. Yeah, the profit margins actually. I don't know if this one had the default broker. It does not. But essentially, so see right here, MLL broker right here, that's actually an agent. But that's essentially the difference between how the distributed utility that is out there, the default broker, and then our algorithm did. There's such a large gap in profit margin, it was phenomenal. And it proved that doing something more privatized is the answer as opposed to having regulated monopolies. Yeah. It's pretty radical, actually.
How do the consumers and the wholesale market work exactly?
Okay, so maybe better to do. Probably better to do this one. Okay, you're asking what's the difference. The question was, I think, what's the difference between the consumers and the wholesale market, or how do they work in this?
Yeah, I mean, what kind of algorithms do they use to simulate the consumers? Do they have like some choice option that they will do this, or they will prefer this kind of tariff?
Yes.
Or do they just have a random algorithm that they will put the minimum tariff and stuff like that?
So the determination by the consumers, both residential and big business, because you have to serve businesses as well as consumers as a civilian, just as a person. So each of those persons, their algorithm is handled by the server. The broker isn't directly responsible for that. So say if a person decides to decline your offer, that's not the broker's fault. It's just the server's algorithm. That's, for the most part, randomized within certain thresholds. So, for instance, right here, I'll show the tariffs. Certain percentage of your customers will not like renewable energy. So if you only offer a renewable market, most of them will not choose you as your broker, and you will not have your maximized utility. Whereas a lot of other people will want more reliability, so they'll lean more to the end that has less renewable options. And then there's, of course, price options and stuff. For instance, one of the other agents, Crocodile agent, their primary strategy was to look for people who have loyalty discounts. So regardless of how expensive you are, if you promise to be cheaper for staying with them over time, they will choose you. So that's one of the strategies that people had, was kind of like playing with them. Another strategy by CWI broker was to have variable fixed rates. So they say, yeah, you're going to have a fixed rate for the first 2 days with us, but then after that, who knows what the rate is, but you're locked in for a month, you know? And so the first 2 days were great, really low prices, and then they just swung the interest rate up and really like got a bad reputation with people, but that means they got way better profits. So, yeah. Does that answer your question?